market on close. I'm Sam Vardis. I live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It's time now for Overlooked Stocks as shares of Vita Coco spiking to a new record high today after Stevens upgraded shares to overweight. The stock is now up over 35% this year, so it's had a good run. So I'm joined by George Tsilis, senior markets correspondent, to get us across this one. What are you seeing as far as the analyst note there, and what do you make of the reaction in the stock today?
Well, what I've been seeing in the stock, especially in the last few weeks since the company reported earnings, just a continuation of growth. Stock is also trading at a reasonable price, and I'll explain in a sec. But I think when it comes down to Vita Coco, the functional beverage company is really expanding into other product lines like protein-infused drinks, as well as things like packaged water, which traditionally speaking is more vitamin-based and coconut-based. But they've also been expanding in international markets. And for what it's worth, their branding and core marketing has actually been working out for the business. If you look at Stevens, they upgraded the stock to $58 from $40, overweight from an equal weight. That actually is pretty much in line with the rest of the consensus analysts, which have a midpoint target of 54 and a high target about $61 on this name. I think that this company seems to be converting its brand recognition, the right marketing, as well as the fact that they just continue to grow their earnings and sales at a pretty substantive clip. If you look at their earnings call going back to the 29th of October, top line sales are up 37%. They posted essentially a beat on EPS of around 40 cents a share, which is a significant number compared to the previous estimates for the full fiscal year of only about $1.22 in terms of earnings. So I think since the earnings call last quarter, their play on international markets as well as new product lines has really created a situation where we see the growth estimates for the business continue to inch higher. Analysts continue to move their targets higher, and the price continues to move to the upside. It's pretty remarkable that these, functional beverage companies, once they get traction in terms of brand recognition and popularity and trends, they do very well. If you look at the 5-year chart, or since the IPO at the very least, for Coco going back to late 2021. It was trading around $15, so it's effectively, if you look at the stock price, more than 3 or almost 4 times increased its rate of return.
Yeah, and I suppose it's also notable to see a company performing like this. I mean, it's up 40% or so year to date in an environment. I was having a fascinating conversation with J&J Snacks just before this. Seems like we're seeing a bit of a protein theme in this show. I don't know, but I think that really speaks to this sort of functionality that, these companies, these F&B brands are adapting to more health-conscious consumers, the Maha movement, whatever it is, in the face of a consumer that is value-hungry, cost-conscious as well, and also the threat of these tariffs. But I do see that some of the analysts' notes do refer to maybe some of that bear case, or at least that overhang being removed because of a little bit of an easing up on that front. Can you sort of talk us through, what the analysts are saying here?
Yeah, I think if you look at the company as an independent producer, one of the challenges is scale. And again, considering the price action we're seeing and also the growth numbers, gives you an idea that their branding and marketing is done extremely well. Tariffs are going to impact certainly businesses like this, which generally are going to be producing overseas and selling overseas. They don't have the central, top line sales and even bottom line margins to compete with companies that have a large scale like PepsiCo or Coke. So they're more susceptible to things like tariffs. And some easement of tariffs are certainly going to benefit these growth companies like Coco compared to some of the larger multinational companies like PepsiCo or Coca-Cola, which are major competitors of Vita Coco. So with that said, again, some reprieve on tariff is going to impact the bottom line more so on a magnified capacity than competition. But interesting enough, looking at top line sales last quarter up 37%, that alone is quite good, considering, again, the growth rates on a trailing basis for sales prior to that in the last year were only 23%. So they're increasing their top line sales. They're gaining more scalable traction on an EPS front. And margin expansion is really the story here, too, because if you look at net income margins for the business, at gross margins around 36% of sales, those numbers have been increasing. That gives you an idea that costs of goods sold are in line relative to price. But at the same time, net income margins are close to 12%, considering it's a higher number by 50%, 5-year average of around 8%. So they're growing at a reasonable price profitably and earnings multiples right now based on next year's earnings around 33 times. But you got to keep in mind that sales alone are growing at around 22%, and earnings are growing faster than sales. So at one times, it's forward earnings growth. Maybe it's not necessarily expensive here, despite the move it's had in the last 52 weeks.
Yeah, and just very, very briefly, Georgia, obviously we are talking about an upgrade here from Stevens. But if I look across some of the analyst consensus here, I mean, you've got quite a few in the hold camp, but I mean, most are looking at a buy or a strong buy, no sort of underperform or sells here. So it's continuing to do something right here. Anything sort of stand out to you about some of the analyst notes here?
Yeah, if you look right now, at least when I saw that the high target on the name is around 61, midpoint target's around 54. So right now, the consensus is still midpoint around a hold rating, which is approximately where we're at in terms of price. And it has made, like I said, a nice move in the last few weeks. That's a function of the returns that we're seeing and the adjustments in modeling, hence the upgrades. If you look at the stock price action as well as some of the analyst upgrades, including Goldman's recent upgrade as well, maybe it's fully valued at the least right now, considering the movement it's had in the last 3 weeks since its earnings.
Okay, good look at Vita Coco today. Thank you so much for that, George Tsilis.